Good afternoon, everybody. It's 1:02. We'll get started. Welcome to the second of our public meetings on the Vermont Draft Comprehensive Energy Plan for 2022. My name is TJ Poor. I'm the Director of Efficiency and Energy Resources at the Public Service Department. With us today are a number of staff from the department who have all contributed to the plan. I'm just going to introduce a couple of them because they will have active roles today. Edward Delhagen will help with the logistics and meeting etiquette for Zoom, and Philip Peacock will help be the traffic cop for the public comments this afternoon. Commissioner Tierney was scheduled to be here today, but she's had a conflict arise and can no longer make it. She's now speaking with FERC Commissioner Clements about energy security and reliability for the upcoming winter. That was a meeting got shifted to this time, and so she sends her regrets. Before we really get started, I'm going to turn it to Edward Delhagen to go over some logistics for today.
Great, thank you, and welcome everybody for joining us today. The agenda we're going to use for the meeting today is basically to just do a little quick recap of some Zoom requirements and etiquette, and then TJ is going to do a short presentation on the draft 2022 CEP, and then we'll open it up for comments. We really look forward to hearing what you have to say. We'll close out with more information on how you can submit additional comments to the department, and then wrap it up. Okay, next slide. So in the Zoom meeting today, we asked folks to remain muted with your video off unless you're actively sharing comments, and this will help with the bandwidth question. And just to let folks know, the meeting is going to be recorded, and the department will post this on the CEP website after the event. When you share your comments, we ask you to raise your hand using the Zoom function, and Philip will recognize you and welcome your comments. If anybody is joining by phone, please use the press *6 function and then share your comments. And after that, hit *6 again to remute your phone. We ask everybody to be mindful of the time so that we leave plenty of opportunity for everybody to share their comments. Okay, next. A few points of meeting etiquette that we ask folks to abide by as we go through this public meeting. First, when you do speak, please introduce yourself, and if you're representing an organization, please let us know. Please be concise and respectful, including time limitations, again, so we have ample time for everybody to share their thoughts. If you know what part of the CEP you'd like to address your comments to, please tell us. That will help staff understand what parts of the draft that we need to work on. If there is some additional time at the end of the meeting, we will have the chance for some additional conversation and discussion. And those are the major points. Does that sound like a workable set of ideas for everybody? I hope so. Okay, I think that's it for the etiquette piece. TJ, we'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Ed. So before we dive into the presentation, which is really just going to give a brief introduction to the energy plan for those of you who haven't had enough time to really dive into the details of it, I just would like to make a few overarching contextual comments on how our draft plan fits within that environment. So Vermont's energy system really serves people through the provision of critical services necessary to power our modern life, like warm and healthy homes and reliable fuels to facilitate our transportation needs and our mobility. And as we all know, I think that we're at a time that the energy system is rapidly evolving. We have lots of technological changes happening that are really setting the foundation to transition to a more affordable and cleaner, more efficient and reliable energy future. We made a lot of progress. We haven't been sitting around doing nothing since the last CEP. The last several years, we've implemented the Renewable Energy Standard, which really not only requires a certain amount of renewable energy procured by our distribution utilities, but also tasks them to provide opportunities for their customers to reduce fossil fuels, and doing that while keeping rates in check. We've doubled our natural gas program and efficiency program investment. We've developed a really broad array of electric vehicle support, including customer incentives and public charging infrastructure across the state. Back in the electric sector, we have over 400 megawatts of solar installed and 50 megawatts of storage permitted, and updated access to financing for borrowers. But really, that's just a start. Energy Plan really recognizes that we have a great opportunity here. We're maintaining and expanding our aggressive renewable energy targets and meeting the greenhouse gas reduction requirements of the state. But we also recognize that currently the burdens and the benefits of energy policy in the state have not been equitably distributed across the state or its people. Depending on your community, average energy spending as a percent of income can be as high as 20%. And many individuals can see a much higher energy burden than that. And that really forces tough decisions for each individual on paying for critical energy service or other bills, healthcare or otherwise. So really this plan is attempting to facilitate the energy transition that we need in a manner that intends to leave no Vermonter left behind. So in doing that, it's really critical that we keep electric sector costs down to better the economic proposition for customers to actually switch from fossil fuels to our cleaner electric supply. And that requires in part having a secure and affordable electric grid that can efficiently integrate and optimize penetrations of distributed energy resources, the electric vehicles, the heat pumps, distributed generation and storage, to really enhance the state's resilience. This plan's really the next step in an ongoing process to chart our energy future. It's what I'm really excited about is that the plan describes the decision-making process, including reviewing policies from not just one single perspective, but a customer perspective, a utility or program administrator perspective, what it means to the state and what it means to society. With that kind of broad look at, we can articulate the trade-offs between policies for decision makers and have it really be transparent on what those decisions are based on. There are indeed trade-offs with every one of the policies that we are talking about. And so today, I'm really excited to get feedback on, in particular, that decision-making process, and the pathways, strategies, and actions that are born from that process, and what maybe we missed in evaluating pathways or something we haven't considered. That type of feedback can be extremely valuable as we head toward a final 2022 energy plan. And we really appreciate the time you're taking here and are going to do our best to be responsive to your comments. So with that, I'm going to give a brief overview of the plan, the impetus behind it and what's in it, and then we can take comments. Claire, if you could pull the slides back up. Thank you, and you could head to the next slide. So really, our energy plan is rooted in our state's energy policy, and that is articulated in statute. And what the Title 30, Section 202A calls for is meeting our energy service needs reliably, securely, and sustainably. Affordability is a key principle, and ensuring the state's economic vitality. We want to use resources cost effectively, and we are required to achieve greenhouse gas reductions. And next slide. Those principles are really rooted in statute, As of yesterday, we have a climate action plan that is now published, as well as a draft energy plan. These two plans have a lot of similarities, and there's a big amount of overlap in the two, as you can see in the center circle here. Both plans are targeted to achieve cost-effective greenhouse gas reduction requirements. They have robust energy sector analysis, and they've shared some of that analysis and also public engagement efforts. Both plans really focus on equitable transitions and have leveraged each other in different ways on these shared goals. The climate action plan is a little bit different. It has requirements and pathways for climate adaptation. It addresses non-energy greenhouse gas emissions, and it really reviewed the greenhouse gas inventory closely. You won't see any of that in the energy plan, except for reference to the greenhouse gas inventory in terms of how we track our emissions. And then on the energy plan side, we talk more about renewable energy development. The electric plan, the energy plan is also our state's electric plan, and that includes reliability. The energy system planning with the principles from Section 202A that I talked about. And it also, there's an appendix to the plan that provides enhanced energy standards for local planning, consistent with Act 174 from 2016. So there's a lot of overlap between the climate plan that was just published and the energy plan. We've worked together throughout, but they are distinct plans. Next slide, please. So in developing the plan, we did do modeling. We used the low emissions analysis platform, LEAP, to really understand some scenarios of pathways of how we can meet our greenhouse gas requirements and renewable energy goals. This modeling really is indicative and really helps refine the question. It tests sensitivities on what do we need to get there and can help us have some insights, but it isn't predictive and it doesn't lay out a particular path of you must do X to achieve Y. It really helps frame the questions and helps us understand our options. One of the good things about LEAP is that this, unlike past models that we've used for energy plan modeling, is that this will be an internal model to state government that will be transparent. The model itself is posted on our website now, and you can download that and the software to run it, and you can see all the assumptions in it. And we intend to update it to help us track our progress to meeting our state's goals. Next slide, please. So the structure of the CEP, we start at the bottom of this pyramid here. We have the principles that I talked about from 202A, which are very consistent with the administration's priorities. So affordability, cost effectiveness, reliability, security, equity, and transparency. That then, using those principles as a foundation, we then develop pathways, strategies, and actions. And this is very consistent with the structure of the climate action plan as well, by design. The pathways are a general path that we can use to get there. For example, reducing energy use in buildings. Then there'll be several strategies under each pathway. For example, in this case, weatherization at scale. And then under weatherization at scale, there's particular actions or recommendations you can make to further that strategy. Overarching throughout the whole plan are a couple of themes. One theme I already touched on of equity and equitable just transitions, and another theme of grid optimization as we transition from fossil fuels to rely more and more on the electric sector. We need to manage the grid appropriately and efficiently. Next slide. So a little more on the equity theme, and recognizing that our current energy system is marked by inequities that have and continue to disproportionately impact many of Vermont's communities. This plan presents opportunities to root out and redress those inequities. And it dedicates a chapter to considering equity and justice issues in Vermont. This references and leverages the work conducted by the Climate Council Just Transition Subcommittee, and that really grounded the energy plan in core concepts and guiding principles. And throughout, all the sectoral chapters were relevant where relevant for specific policy and program recommendations. This energy plan suggests that really building an equitable energy system for Vermont will require a more holistic appraisal of the context in which the programs and policies operate. And we hopefully set the framework for developing more equitable public processes that allow for the voices of Vermonters to be heard and participate in the decision-making process. The chapter also offers broad recommendations aiming to promote energy equity and just transitions considerations. And really that includes that equity should be a core criteria in all the decision-making processes alongside least cost and environmentally sound principles as defined in statute. And next slide, please. So as we transition, as I said, from fossil fuels to a more heavy reliance on the electric sector, it's clear that increasing amount of distributed energy resources, and by that I mean generating resources and load-based resources, are going to be connected to the grid. And so the heat pumps, the EVs, the electric vehicles, other technologies that are producing the services that we want, that the state's residents want affordably, cleaner. From that to understanding the real-time visibility of load through sensors and meters to orchestration of those distributed resources with control platforms, and so that we can ensure that our electricity supply meets demand where it's at. So the plan doesn't give us a stepwise plan for Vermont to reinvent its grid. It's not a grid mod plan that would be out of date as soon as we publish it, but it lays out a vision and a set of principles where we can consider policy, regulatory, and other venues to future-proof decision-making that's happening now around these long-lived investments. Involves taking advantage of the headroom we have in the grid and being clear-eyed and strategic about more grid investments that are really borne by all Vermonters. Next slide, please. So I'm going to really quickly go through each sector here, the electric, thermal, and transportation sector, really briefly where we're at and what the plan's pathways say. And so for electricity, what you see in front of you is the 2019 electric mix. We should have the 2020 data for the final plan, but it does look fairly similar. On the left side, you see the portfolio of our electric utilities based on ownership or contractual arrangement for the energy. That's before the disposition of renewable energy credits are accounted for. And on the right side, you see the utilities portfolio after you account for renewable energy credits. And in both instances, we have a lot of renewable energy and a relatively clean portfolio of hydro and clean is in terms of emissions, nuclear, solar, wind. On the right-hand side, you see that some of the resources, the attributes, are sold into regional markets for the benefit of ratepayers and replaced with other resources. And so it changes the mix a little bit. Next slide, please. So what does the energy plan say for electricity? It sets a target to be 100% carbon-free by 2032. Currently, our renewable energy standard calls for 75% renewable energy by 2032. So this ramps up the amount of energy that's procured by non-carbon emitting sources. The plan really provides a basis for understanding electric costs, what's in electric rates, providing transparency on how our expenditures on electricity are spent. And it sets a pathway of reducing our greenhouse gases in our electric generation, and provides options for achieving that 100% clean energy requirement. Next slide, please. In the thermal sector, we are currently approximately a quarter of our thermal supply is renewable wood, and a small amount of renewable electricity and biofuels, other biofuels, and that's the green section on the chart to the left, with fossil fuels providing the bulk of our heating. On the right, because it's a big component of the energy plan, this shows the amount of weatherization that has been achieved over the last 12 years or so. About 30,000 homes have been weatherized. That sets context for some of the pathways that you'll see. Next slide, please. And in particular, the pathway of reducing energy demand. And weatherization at scale is a primary strategy to reduce energy demand, relying on our current program providers to ramp up weatherization in the state. It also calls for building energy standards to be net zero ready by 2030, to the extent it's cost effective, and broadens our state energy management program to really support municipalities and schools in our to become more efficient in their buildings. Overall, this is all towards a goal to increase our renewable supply to 30% by 2025 from our 25% now, and 70% by 2042 in 20 years, all along a pathway of meeting our 2050 goal. The other pathway in the thermal and process sector is to continue to encourage low carbon technologies and fuel choices. I think a theme throughout the plan is fuel choices are, individual customers are going to make decisions, and we, as a state and in this plan, are not dictating what they should do, but we want to encourage those decisions that help us meet our goals. And so one of those is to consider a clean heat standard. That's an obligation on fuel providers to provide cleaner heating sources, including biofuels, weatherization, and electricity, to study that and see what the costs are. We don't want to just dive in without understanding what the costs are. And then to really continue to promote and encourage clean fuels and technologies as listed on the slide. Next slide, please. Our transportation sector currently is largely fossil fuels. There's 6% ethanol and a small amount of renewable electricity fueling our mobility. Next slide, please. And so this is not shown, is that in most of you have probably heard this, but transportation sector is where the bulk of our greenhouse gas emissions are. And to that end, we are adopting the greenhouse gas reductions proportional to the Global Warming Solutions Act, with 100% of light duty vehicle sales to be zero emission vehicles by 2035. We have several pathways to get there. Vehicle electrification is one, cleaner vehicles and fuels is another, and that California Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulations, we already follow the greenhouse gas emissions requirements of California. They're updating their requirements to require 100% zero emission vehicle sales by 2035. And that's a core component of meeting our goals, but we actually, in order to meet them, we need to accelerate that. And so incentives and other facilitating policies are necessary to advance the adoption of vehicle electrification and cleaner fuels. Next slide. Two other transportation pathways really related to land use settlement patterns and compact development. So it really recognizes that integration of land use planning into transportation decision-making frameworks are necessary to help mitigate the expected increase in vehicle miles traveled. So planning where our buildings go and how we use land to really make our lessen our mobility needs. That can be done with smart growth designation programs, compact development support, and really aligning planning that has been done in silos in a lot of instances across government agencies. And then increasing transportation choices. We, again, are not dictating that a resident or a business do a particular path, but we are encouraging and making available public transit, rail, encouraging biking and walking. These don't just have energy benefits, they have health benefits and many other benefits to the state's economy. Next slide, please. So I won't go into too much detail about these components. There's an energy finance chapter that discusses ways to help mitigate that upfront costs of a lot of investments that need to happen in our energy transition, and help those who may not have access to financing or an aversion to financing these types of investments. The CEP includes a state agency energy plan to lead buildings and general services to lead by example. That plan is a part of the CEP, but also published separately and is linked separately on our website. It includes enhanced energy planning standards for Act 174, where if municipalities or regions follow those, they can get deferential treatment in energy siting decisions by the Public Utility Commission. And we will have modeling appendices. The model is posted, and we'll have appendices describing the model posted for review. Next slide, please. So we're at a point in the energy plan where we're doing public hearings in December and accepting written comments until December 20th. We hear your comments today, but written comments will also be very welcome. And in January, we will provisionally adopt a comprehensive energy plan. Throughout this process, we've been coordinating stakeholder engagement with the Climate Council, and we plan to continue to do that with the Climate Council's recently released Climate Action Plan and future public engagement. Next slide, please. And this slide just has the other areas, opportunities for comment. I mentioned the written comments, which we very much appreciate. We also are having 5 in-person public hearings across the state, which the locations of which you can link to here. This presentation will be posted on our website, and you can get the CEP from our website. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ed to just remind us of the logistics for public comment, and we really looking forward to engaging with you the rest of the meeting today.
Okay, great. Thanks, TJ. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, if you have some comments you'd like to share, please raise your hand and Philip will recognize you, and we'll try to get through the whole roster expeditiously. If you are calling in from the phone, and it looks like we have at least one person joining us by telephone, we'll make sure that we check in with you. And if you'd like to have a share comment, hit *6. And at the end of that, again, *6 to remute your phone. We have about 20 people or so on the phone, and we've got about 80 minutes or so left. So try and help make this equitable. We'll ask folks to try to keep your comments limited to about 3 or 4 minutes. That will leave us a little bit of time at the end of the meeting for some additional conversation and to wrap up. So we have a final slide. And just as a reminder, these are the points that we've asked folks to abide by to help us have a very productive and engaging conversation. Leave that up for a second for folks to refresh themselves. And with that, Philip, I think we'll check in with you and see where we are and getting our comments rolling.
Thanks, Ed. I see Fran Putnam has a hand up, so we can start with Fran. And I don't think we'll need it, but I will start a 4-minute clock, and so I'll give you a heads up. I'll give everyone a heads up when you've gone about 3 minutes and 30 seconds, so you know you can wrap up with a conclusion. So, Fran, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a couple of things I wanted to mention. The first one is how are we going to reach vulnerable Vermonters? And I'm a member of the Weybridge Energy Committee, and we've done a lot of work on weatherization. But where we've not been able to reach people is people who live in apartments who don't own their own homes. They often pay their own fuel bills, but the landlord has no incentive to weatherize. So I've also learned that BIPOC people in Vermont are much less likely to own their own home. So this is a place where equity comes into the equation. So that's just one example of how sometimes when we make these programs like the Weatherization Assistance Program, they don't really work for the more vulnerable Vermonters. So that's something I would like to see some work done with landlords and a way to either encourage them or to require them to weatherize the homes, the apartments and so on that they own. The other thing that I'm concerned about is charging stations in the state of Vermont. And having an electric car at the moment, and we've traveled around Vermont, and it's very clear that it's a very inequitable situation. There are very few good charging stations. I'm talking about level 3 charging stations because that's what you need when you're traveling. Hardly any in the Northeast Kingdom, for example. So I would like to see attention put on making sure that any charging stations are done in an equitable way, in a geographical, in a way that is equitable geographically, and also that there's a push made to put charging stations in places like condominiums and apartments and so on, so that you don't have to have a charger in your own home to be able to own an electric vehicle. So that is, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Much appreciated. I think on the first one, you identified a real problem in the state. The plan does call to support a program, a pilot program that should be starting in 2022 and continue to support it, which would be it's called a to the meter financing program with the assistance of Vermont Housing Finance Agency that that does not require the customer to actually take out a loan. Instead, they sign up and they can get weatherization to the meter in terms of if they leave that rental unit, then they could, the loan, if you will, stays with that housing unit and is then the obligation of the next tenant. That is starting with single family homes, including renters, but is hopefully can be expanded to include multifamily buildings. The Weatherization Assistance Program does do some multifamily family, and I think that you've hit the nail on the head with that's really a spot that landlords are we need to do better to encourage landlords to make those investments in building owners. We're trying to do that with weatherization, and I think we'll make sure that chapter emphasizes really the equity implications that you're highlighting. So I very much appreciate that. On the charging stations, I think what underscores, this will go to your comment and maybe others, we really have an incredible opportunity with a lot of federal funding coming our way. The infrastructure bill that was just passed has $21 million over the next several years to support infrastructure investments, and we can. I will take that comment to heart and go back to the plan and review and make sure that as we are making those investments, we're considering equity, as I articulated in the presentation, equally with other needs and with the charging stations. So thank you very much for your comments, and we will certainly consider as we go forward.
And Zach Porter, looks like you're all set to speak next. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Porter, and I'm the director of Standing Trees, which is a relatively new organization that is working across our region to protect and restore our native forest ecosystems, especially on public lands. And we have some really serious concerns about the Comprehensive Energy Plan and the Climate Action Plan's push for more use of wood burning for electricity. And that's what I want to talk to you today about in particular, among other potential and related concerns, but I'll really focus on biomass for electricity today. I've been participating in the Climate Action Plan process since it started, following the Agriculture and Ecosystems Subcommittee closely over that time, as well as the Climate Council to a lesser degree, and also have been watching this process over the last year as well. And I'm a little bit concerned that we're still putting the cart before the horse here. I hope that the resolution of the biomass conversation that is still going on with the Climate Action Plan process will inform the final version of this plan. And it looks like that there is a possibility for that. That's described in the CEP plan from what I read. But I just want to make sure that that is true, that this final document will reflect what comes out of the conversations between the Ag and Ecosystems and cross-sector mitigation and science and data subcommittees, which I think are all kind of continuing this biomass dialogue right now. Biomass is a high carbon energy source, full stop. Biomass emits 1.5 times the carbon of coal burning for an equivalent amount of electricity. There are some people who do the math and suggest that biomass is somehow carbon neutral or that it is renewable, and neither of these is true. Carbon, like I just said, is significantly higher what's released immediately into the atmosphere than coal burning. And from a renewable perspective, when you cut down a forest that's 75 or 100 years old, it takes 75 or 100 years to get the carbon back that was in that forest. So when we talk about the time frame that's needed to meet climate goals that we have as a state and as a globe right now, burning our forests for electricity doesn't make a lot of sense. There are better ways to power our clean energy future. And this is to say nothing of the public health impacts. The American Allergy and Asthma Network, Academy of Pediatrics, American Lung Association, and a number of other national public health organizations have all come out publicly opposing biomass for electricity. And I want to make this clear, I'm really focusing on biomass for electricity today. I know that there are other uses of wood for heat and other thermal uses. And while there are concerns of mine there too, I'm really talking to you about biomass for electricity and the impacts of facilities like McNeil and Reigate and the potential for additional biomass electricity facilities in Vermont. In terms of decarbonization pathways, chapter 7.8, biomass is not listed, reducing our reliance on biomass is not listed as a decarbonization pathway. And I would suggest that the folks, all of you working on this document here, consider adding reductions in biomass electricity usage as a decarbonization pathway. And it's really, to me, mystifying why it would not be included as such. So I guess just want to make a couple of other notes here.
Zach,
I'm also concerned.
You have about 30 seconds.
Okay,
so
great.
So take what you need, but just be brief, please.
Yep. Just want to make a note about siting. The Agriculture and Ecosystem Subcommittee talked at length about renewable energy siting. Co-chair Billy Coster really focused on the importance of maintaining our natural and working lands, so to speak, and not converting intact forests and wetlands to renewable energy development uses. This includes putting solar panels in class 2 wetlands, for example, or putting wind turbines on ridgelines that have no development. It, again, doesn't make sense. This is a false choice to suggest that to meet our clean energy goals, we need to disturb intact ecosystems. We can find appropriate sites for renewable energy in places that are already disturbed in one way or another. We can do both in Vermont. So I just wanted to emphasize that at the end here. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate the chance to comment and welcome the chance to visit with the team working on this beyond this meeting, if that would be of interest to anybody. So thank you and take care.
Thanks, Zach. Much appreciate the comments. I think the energy plan really is looking to the greenhouse gas inventory that's established and has been really reviewed by the Climate Council in order to track emissions. And I think you're right. There's a lot of discussion around the appropriate treatment of biomass in that context, both for heating and for electricity. I'm not going to sit here and pretend today that I'm a biomass greenhouse gas expert. Though I've reviewed a lot of those materials, the discussion around biomass emissions is complicated, and we will be continuing to follow what's going on in the Climate Council, and to the extent we can, we're going to try and reflect the best available information in the final draft of the energy plan. I also hear your comments on siting. I think we can consider and make sure that we're in this area kind of also consistent with the message that across state agencies here. Should have mentioned earlier that this plan is not just the department's plan. Lots of different state agencies have contributed to this, including the Agency of Natural Resources, and Agency of Transportation, Commerce and Community Development, which does a lot of land use planning, our agriculture and markets agency, Office of Economic Opportunity, and I'm sure I'm forgetting others, but so we want to really be sending that consistent message. And I know there's different considerations when a solar plant, for instance, proposes to go somewhere and is cutting down forest to do that. There's a lot of considerations that go into the siting process. So I want to make sure that those are clearly articulated in the plan, and we hear your comments, and we'll make sure we're considering everything in the final. Thank you.
So Will Dodge, I do see your phone, your hand raised, but before we have you speak, I just want to there is one caller. They're welcome. If they have a comment to share, they can unmute themselves now by hitting *6. If you want to speak later, you can hit *9, which is the equivalent of raising your hand. I don't see any action by them. So Will, please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you very much. Appreciate you letting me speak. I'm speaking wearing my hat as the chair of the Essex Energy Committee. I'm very interested in the plan, but I had two general points of concern. The first one has to do with abilities for municipalities to actually finance some of the improvements or obtain funds for the improvement. I know that there are several energy committees, Essex is one of them, that has had real difficulty creating something like revolving loan programs where improvements made in energy or to efficiency within municipal buildings or other types of improvements, net metering, savings, has then been used to foster other growth in additional efficiency and energy improvements. And I'm just wondering in general whether the comprehensive energy plan or the department is thinking differently about what municipal involvement in this next drive towards these various goals is going to look like. Is there any type of compulsion for municipalities to be involved, whether it's part of the comprehensive energy plan or the climate action plan? Or is it really at the end of the day up to municipalities to act voluntarily to take advantage of various incentives and goals that are out there? So that's my first line of questioning. The second is really has to do with the building efficiency goals. It has to do with weatherization. You're familiar, I think it was probably the product of an earlier comprehensive energy plan of 10 VSA 581, which basically created a goal for improving substantially the energy fitness of at least 20% of the state's housing stock by 2017 and 25% by 2020, which amounted to, I guess, 80,000 housing units. And that included reducing the annual fuel needs and fuel bills by an average of 25% in those units. Our energy committee has been part of the button-up campaigns now for several years. And we've been, one of my members in particular has been working with some folks at the department to look at kind of what have been the results and how much weatherization are we really seeing. And one of the things that came to light is that a lot of the weatherizations that have been counted result in less than 25% of a reduction in fuel needs and fuel bills. And we're wondering if the comprehensive energy plan tries to address that and ratchet us back up a little closer to the 25%. So those are my comments. I very much appreciate you taking the time, and I'll mute.
Yeah, thank you, Will, for those comments. As to the first one, the answer is that the energy plan continues to encourage municipalities to participate. It doesn't make participation compulsory. And in one of the main ways that we're able to encourage that is, and this is a continuation from the last energy plan, is the state energy management program has been established for state energy operations, and has set up a revolving loan fund for the state to actually make those investments in their own operations and facilities. And recently, we have been able to, like in the last several months, have been able to start to stand up a program that I think will become more available to municipalities, to expand that to municipalities, to allow them to access, hopefully, some of that revolving loan fund, and actually even provide incentives to lower the costs, even maybe beyond what Efficiency Vermont is able to offer. Again, this is even more so, there's an opportunity with the infrastructure bill. This will take several months for the funds to kind of work their way to the state and then again to the municipalities. But the plan is for those funds to be available in a revolving loan fund, and a pretty significant amount to start to actually help municipalities. But again, it's all encouragement right now and not compulsory. In terms of the weatherization goals, you're absolutely right. The 30,000 achieved that I put up on the screen is way, way short of 80,000, and that was required. And of those 80,000, most of those were single family, to Fran's earlier comment, but there were multifamily homes as well in there. And the average savings for single family homes are in the 17 to 20% range, but for multifamily homes, they're much higher. And so one of the ways we could hit that average target, I should say households is the actually better terminology there. And so one of the ways to hit that average savings target is to actually shift more, do more with multifamily buildings. And then it has those equity components that Fran was talking about earlier as well. And so I think there's a trade-off. It's always a balance, right, on how deep you go in a home with the available funds that you have. And one of the things for weatherization that the energy plan does is say, we want to kickstart the funding for weatherization with available federal funds that are flowing now, but also find those sustainable funding sources that have eluded us over the last decade, and really explore those more and continue to promote weatherization, and particularly in those multifamily buildings. So thank you again for your comments.
Thanks. And I see Annette Smith, your hand's up. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Annette Smith with Vermonters for a Clean Environment. I actually have read the plan now, so I'm going to make specific comments. I found 2 typos. On ES 15, line 3, it says ride hair, it should be share. On page 7-12, the second paragraph, last sentence has footnote 24, but there is no footnote 24. Chapter 4, smart grid, I think that there should be a mention of the smart meter opt-out program. Doesn't need to promote it or denigrate it, but I think it at least should be in there. Resiliency, GMP has a new undergrounding technology, and I think the plan should discuss it and its potential for use. And the interconnection discussions about solar, I wonder if there should also be some discussion about interconnection issues and adding more onshore industrial wind. In chapter 5, I think that the plan needs to discuss, because there's so much in transportation that is about electric vehicles, I think that it does need to talk about the need for increased mining, and that Vermont is externalizing those environmental problems outside of Vermont with the expansion of the need for lithium, copper, cobalt. And I think there should also be some reference to the issue of fires from lithium batteries. The land use discussion should mention that fiber optic cable enables working from home and can result in less vehicle miles traveled. The graph on page 5-9, I think it would be good to include the total number of vehicles in Vermont to provide some context. 5.4.2 charging infrastructure. I think it would be good to talk about the potential for solar canopies over parking lots, incorporating EV charging so people can charge their vehicles while shopping or at work. Historic development patterns. I know this isn't a popular notion, but I really somewhat take issue with the idea that we're all going to move to village centers. My town of Danby was settled in the higher elevations, and it was only when the railroad came through that people went down to the valleys, and the town center is in a flood hazard area. There are wetlands along Route 7, or actually Route 7 is built through wetlands, and there is no room for infill due to historic buildings. I think that there just needs to be some, take the rose glasses off of that one. There needs to be some reality about what it means to and what Vermont's historic settlement patterns actually have been. I think that there really needs to be some discussion for commuter rail, about commuter rail and what potential there might exist. For instance, the Western Corridor, which doesn't have an interstate. If there was commuter rail from Bennington to Burlington, it would be a tremendous economic, tourist, and environmental opportunity to get people out of their cars and they can work while traveling. Chapter 6, advanced wood heat. I think that there should be some discussion about the challenges and in particular, the fossil fuel consumption for harvesting, transportation, and processing, which is fairly large, and that needs to be fleshed out more. Renewable natural gas. While the sections, it's about landfills and farm methane, but there's also mention of the virtual RNG that VGS got permission to do from Iowa. Is that really where we want to go in with Vermont's gas? I think that should be discussed. Chapter 7. rec prices 7-11 and 7-12. Should there be more? I think there should be more detail about the alternative compliance payments, their value compared to class 1 and class 2 recs, and actually put the numbers in. I know they fluctuate, but I still think it should be in there. And whether any ACPs have ever been made to the Clean Energy Development Fund. I know it's an option, but has it ever been done? That would be good to put in the plan. 726, discuss the current status of the standard offer program, its pending expiration, and any potential changes that we can expect in that program or net metering. I think that's a deficiency. Section 7.6.1.1, I think it should include, that's where it ought to include that the replacement for those things, net metering and standard offer programs. 7-32 references the joint letters that regional planning commissions and municipalities are giving out. In addition to what's there, they also bypass good public process. They don't require a joiner notification, and the information is very poorly developed by the time that they come to the towns. I call it the friends and family preferred sites letter. And they're not often good sites. So there just needs to be more discussion of what that really means.
And that I should say you have about 30 seconds left.
I have 4 lines left.
Okay. Thanks.
7-30, where is the discussion about siting wind energy? The plan is silent on wind energy. I don't think that is appropriate, both from a grid perspective, also environmental perspective, and a societal perspective. This is a major deficiency in the plan. We've had experience with it. Why isn't it in the plan? Why isn't it even mentioned? Why is it all about solar? I wonder if there's any potential for low impact run of river and small scale hydro in Vermont. I don't mean building dams. I mean something else. If there is, a lot of people, boy, when I was involved at the Rutland Regional Planning Commission with energy, everybody said, what about hydro? What about hydro? Chapter 8, I think that really needs to be fleshed out to include a discussion about equity financing, the ITC and the PTC and how they work to enable net metering, how they work to enable utility development. The whole financing issues are lacking transparency. My understanding is that, for instance, equity financing is used to fund net metering projects where wealthy individuals have high tax liabilities. And so then they get a healthy return on investment, which appears to enrich the wealthy. And with high net metering rates, then that's a transfer of wealth from the lesser to those who already have money. So those are my comments, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Annette, for the really thorough review of the plan. And those are the types of comments we need to hear in terms of what types of considerations are we missing. For example, just the consideration of transportation and processing and advanced wood heat, or discussion of the life cycle societal issues associated with EVs. This is really good to hear, and I appreciate the thorough review, and we'll do our best to go back and address and consider those comments in the final. I can tell you that only one utility has paid an ACP, and it was for 1 megawatt hour that they missed in tier 3, and so it was $10 to the Clean Energy Development Fund. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Mark Whitworth, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. As a former member of the board of the Clean Energy Development Fund, I'm glad that they're really raking it in now. I want to thank you for all of the hard work that you guys have done on this. This is, I bet you're getting ready to have relaxing holidays. And I bet you haven't had them up until now. So I had a comment about you have a discussion in there about storage and demand management. And it seems like you're prioritizing storage over demand management. And demand management seems to me to be a win-win-win kind of a situation, and storage seems like lose-lose. You go on to say at one point that there are no incentives in place for demand management or some aspect of demand management. And then there's a big discussion about all of the advantages of it. So, it seems to me that there are plenty of incentives for demand management and time of day pricing and, all of those things. You talk at one point about the diversity in the electricity supply, but I'm a little concerned about the diversity in my own energy supply. Like if I have an Irene or an ice storm experience and my lifeline to the source of all my energy gets interrupted, I'm in trouble, especially if my car runs on batteries and my heating system is dependent upon. Excuse me for a minute. Okay. So I think that there's a tremendous amount of virtue in a diverse energy supply in the home, not only a diverse set of generating technologies that are going to provide us with electricity. I quite liked the postcards from the future. There are a bunch of issues on page 413 that I'm glad to see that you're highlighting them. I wonder whose job it is to suggest criteria and an evaluation protocol for resolving the issues that you've listed. I was especially interested in the spending $500 million to unlock 600 megawatts of solar. We need to be talking about that. And so far, energy development in Vermont has been it's been the Wild West. We need to get the transmission and distribution utilities in on the act to tell us where it's useful to have generation and where it's not useful. I live in the Northeast Kingdom, and a lot of the energy projects that are being built here are being curtailed. This seems like a waste of resources, a waste of time, a waste of money, and a blight upon the land. I have another suggestion for an issue that you might want to put in there, and that is the life expectancy of a technology, or the life expectancy of a technology's relevance. We all know that we need baseload power, but we're spending an incredible amount of time talking about intermittent electricity generators. I don't know how we're going to meet our goals if that's all we have. And I know that there are a variety of carbon-free baseload technologies under development. I hope that we don't overinvest in technologies that are going to be obsolete, or certainly or just irrelevant by the time we write that postcard from 2050. It's going to be a sad day if the postcard from 2050 talks about what a terrible shame it was to blow the tops off all of those mountains to put up wind turbines that we're not using anymore. Another potential technology that's obsolete before it's been adopted in a widespread way is battery-powered vehicles. I wonder if the reason that battery-powered vehicles are being pushed so much is because there are legislative requirements that are pushing them, and not because the technology is good or the market is there. I know that there are some countries that are hoping to leapfrog battery-powered vehicles with fuel cell vehicles. Myself, I'm not very interested in a battery-powered vehicle, but I'd be quite interested in a fuel cell vehicle. And if I had to wait 10 years longer, it'd be worth it to me. So I hope we don't impoverish ourselves putting up charging stations all over the place that are going to be obsolete when that technology is leapfrogged. I wish I were as organized as Annette Smith, but I'm not. Yeah, I guess, I want to return briefly to the diversity issue and putting all our eggs in one electric basket. It makes it sound like buying stock in home generator manufacturers is a good move at this point. And I wonder what the greenhouse gas impact of all of those generators is going to be, and all of the materials that went into building them, because we know the power is going to go out. I live at the end of a power line, and my electricity goes out all the time. And I don't want to be sitting here with an inoperative heat pump. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. I hear you. My parents still live in Pittsford, just north of Rutland, at the end of a line, and even just after Thanksgiving, their power went out a couple times. They have a couple of heat pumps, but they also have a backup oil system, and for them, that is providing the resilience and they're still, and they have a small generator that can help power that and run the fans to distribute the heat from the oil system. But it is it just speaks to the resilience issues that we're going to be facing if we're relying on the electric grid. For all of our needs. Well, we better have that grid to be really, really reliable, or we're going to have troubles. You can't go without heat for 7 days and without access to critical services. And so we did try to address that in the grid optimization chapter. I appreciate the comments on demand management. I will take a look on that, and I think shifting load could absolutely be more cost effective and even reliable than storage. And we'll look at how that prioritization is written there, but it's in some respects, it could be an all of the above strategy. One thing that the modeling does show is that there are going to be, if all these heat pumps come online and all these electric vehicles come online and they use the amount of energy that they are forecasted to use, there's going to be significant increases in the demand in the grid. And we need to really manage that. Just looking through other notes. Oh, and we will get, we're getting a lot of written comments right before the end of year holidays, so we'll probably be working then too. But thank you for that now. And
Well, I'm glad you'll be busy.
yes. So thank you for your comments. I wrote down a couple of pages of notes on those, and we have other note takers. I don't know that I addressed them all or can immediately, but we'll definitely consider those.
Okay, thank you, TJ. If anyone else would like to speak, now is a good time to raise your hand in Zoom. To the one caller on the phone, you can hit *9 or just *6 to unmute yourself. And I also want to invite anyone who has already spoken if I cut you off, or if you've got more to say, you're welcome to raise your hand again. Annette, I see your hand is up. Please go ahead.
I think I forgot to say the positive thing that I wanted to say, which is chapter 4. I think you did a really excellent job fleshing out the details of the deficiencies in the grid having to do with the costs associated with upgrading substations. I have not really understood how to read Green Mountain Power's Solar 2 map and what the gray areas meant. But reading that was really, really good. And whoever wrote that, I want to applaud you for really, that's the kind of informational detail that really needs to be in this plan. And so thank you for that. You did a good job. That's all.
Thank you, Annette. I'll give credit to Anne Margolis, was the lead on that chapter, and I agree, she did a fantastic job.
Okay, thank you, Annette. Thanks, TJ. And I see Anne from CCRPC. Please go ahead.
So I'm Ann Janda. I'm an energy project manager with Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. And I did my best to get through the document, although I wasn't able to read the whole thing before this meeting. But I do want to say it's very comprehensive. It covers a lot of ground, and I will piggyback off of what Annette said. I feel like I got the most out of reading chapter 4 about the energy grid and how it works and where the constraints are and where the problems are. And it helped me to understand the rest of it. So, you know, we'll be putting together comments as a collective staff. So I'm not going to make any comments on substance at this point. But in terms of format, I felt that the document, although it had excellent information, was really hard to get through. And what I was really looking for were the pathway, strategies, and actions. So one suggestion I would make now is to create maybe an appendix area where there's a table. I put that together for myself in order to look at each of the actions and pathways and then go back and read through the content area to understand where those actions came from, to be able to comment on the actions.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, thank you. That's a really good suggestion, and we'll see if we can put something like that together, whether it's at the release day or soon thereafter. I think we need something like that to track our progress towards each of those pathways and goals, and have kind of a quick reference. So thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you, Anne. Anyone else? Would anyone else like to speak? Mark, please go ahead.
Yeah, there are a couple of interesting looking graphs and exhibits in here. Then I wish I understood them. I puzzled over exhibit 721 for quite a while. And I think it could use some more textual explanation. I'm still not sure I get the hang of it. And there are a couple of great graphics in there, but they're not as self-explanatory as as I wish they were. Thanks.
Thanks for that. I was about to respond and then realized I was looking at exhibit 712 and not 21. So maybe I can't do it on the fly here. No, I guess I can't find it immediately. But Oh, I see. Yeah, we'll look to explain that a little more. That one actually is taken from the climate action plan, talking about the different the economic impact from different possible mitigation pathways, whether they're focused on just kind of a general. Is what the modeling did was created a general pathway, a mitigation pathway, and then it tested that with a bio-heavy approach, and so doing more on biomass and biofuels to meet greenhouse gas targets, and it tested it with the difference between having prioritizing local generation. By local, I mean Vermont-based generation, and it intends to show the difference in costs of those pathways. That economic analysis is still undergoing review by both the Climate Council and the department as part of the energy plan. So we'll take another look at that and try and explain it better in the plan too. I will say, to Ann's comment about the readability of the plan, we spent quite a while trying to think of what's the best structure of the plan to articulate all these complex and intertwining issues. The transportation sector now is a sector, but and you can put a little box around it. But now, with electric vehicles, it really flows into the electric sector quite a bit, and same thing in the thermal sector with heat pumps. And it really, sectors are starting to really blend together. At least for this plan, we still thought it was the simplest and easiest to kind of call them out on sectors with the energy service that it's providing. So transportation and land use was joined in with that, because many land use decisions really affect our mobility. And so it's a challenge. It's 250-page document, which is actually growing with the state agency energy plan. It is bigger than that, and there's many appendices, and it's a lot of information to convey with the energy plan, because as a department, we've been really trying to be transparent around what's our baseline, what are the facts that we all can discuss, and then with those facts, as everybody has their individual forecasts of what the future will look like, well, we can debate in that gray area, but we want to be on the same basis, which is why it's really important to hear this feedback on things that we might have missed in considerations of different issues. And so that's the goal, is to provide that, one of the goals is to provide that really baseline of information and context, and then jump from there as well. How do you, given that baseline and the priorities of our energy policy and the administration, here's our view going forward. But we really want that baseline to be kind of a shared understanding, because if we're just arguing over that baseline, we're never gonna get to a solution. And hopefully we got there, or most of the way there, and your comments in this period are really useful to see where we were lacking. So thank you all.
And I want to again invite anyone to raise your hand if you'd like to speak. And Haley Rose submitted a comment. And Haley, hope you don't mind if I read it. She says she's curious about the interaction between this 2022 CEP and prior CEPs. For example, the 2016 CEP set a goal to reduce total energy consumption per capita by 15% by 2025. Her question is, do goals from prior CEPs carry forward into updates such as this, or is it a blank slate in which the goals from prior CEPs are no longer considered CEP goals?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Haley. So I think it's closer to the latter. I don't know if I would call it a blank slate, just because the last goals and efforts have significantly informed these. That said, the reaching the renewable energy goals and greenhouse gas goals articulated in the plan will likely require meeting those old goals. So this energy plan is now, this 2022 energy plan as of January will be the energy plan of the state. And for the weight that has in particular venues, that's what it will be. Otherwise we could be going back to the 1998 energy plan and pulling something out of there. And so I would look to just reference the most current one.
Okay, thank you, TJ. I will put out a call for any questions, any comments. Now's the time. And I'll note that in the chat, just so you know, the chat is not the best way to share things with us, because it doesn't necessarily save well from the Zoom meeting once the Zoom meeting is closed. But Zach shared something related to biomass electricity, Zach Porter.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Zach. I think if that's the same letter that went to the Climate Council, I think I may have seen that, but I do, if you can, and if you haven't already, if you go onto our website, there's a way to submit comments there, and there's also an email address you can submit comments to, and you could send that to those, and that would be the best way to make sure that we do have that. I've participated a bunch in the Climate Council also, so as in certain subcommittees. So thank you.
So TJ, this is Ed. I have a question I wanted to pose to the folks who are assembled here. During TJ's presentation, he commented on our interest in the department in receiving feedback, not just on the plan itself, but on the structure of the analysis. And we put a considerable effort into this year's analyses that expanded the different lenses that we were considering and try to help lay out a framework for future decision making. I'm wondering if folks have any thoughts on how that was received and any ways that we might be able to improve our analysis along the lines of what Annette suggested with what Ann had done, but in other chapters to help us improve the ability for decision makers and for the public to understand the complexities and the trade-offs that are inherent with many of these decisions.
So I do.
Annette, okay, go ahead, Phil.
I was going to say Annette has raised her hand. That's all.
I thought that overall it was well done. I did complain fairly early on that I thought it should have a table of contents, which it turns out that if you know how to do it in various preview or Adobe modes, that it's there. It just you have to hunt for it. So once I found the table of contents, that made it much, much better. And I understand the final version will have a table of contents. I guess the overall piece that I felt, and I to some respects, I think that it was similar yesterday with the Climate Council's meeting afterward, after it was adopted, where Leslie Ann talked about how it doesn't really talk enough about people. And I guess I'll say that is somewhat of a deficiency here, is how does this affect the people who live here? And I remember 2 decades ago when I started doing this work, dealing with gas pipelines and power plants, I said, boy, the deer and the bear have more protections than we do. And that kind of carries forward that we always look through the regulatory lens of everything but the people who live here. And so I don't know if in some of the preliminary chapters, it's all a little mushy. I don't know if we could be a little more specific, but I mean, or maybe it is an additional chapter, but I think that we need as a society to bring more humanity into it. And so that's the only sort of structural piece that I felt was kind of absent. And it's where my work lies, is I'm dealing with the people who live here, who are dealing with a lot of the things that you folks are addressing through the regulatory process. And what we end up with is hire lawyers and experts, and that's how you participate. And so there's this gap in there about how we maybe could do better in incorporating people into these processes rather than just making people go out and raise and spend money. It goes to the whole equity issue, which the Climate Council has acknowledged has not been upfront the way it needs to be. And I understand that the Department of Public Service is hoping to do something similar in approaching things. And so I think there's a kind of a giant leap that needs to be taken away from where we are right now that incorporates more of the holistic approach to our societal needs for energy. I hope that's helpful, Ed. I don't know if that really answers your question, but I do think that overall I found the structure to be very good.
That was very great, very, very helpful, Annette. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I think the energy plan itself, maybe, well, I'll do it here, is that we acknowledge that similar to the Climate Council, that we, you know, engaging folks in the process, you know, could have been better. I think did better this time than any other time previously, and we did that in the energy plan by relying on the Climate Council process, but which acknowledging that also was not good enough. So I do think we've made progress, but you know, as I take your comment, I see it not only as the process of developing the energy plan, but the process by which we will design programs really needs to involve people and understand how people will be impacted. And you know, I think I'm hopeful that the process that will continue on through the Climate Council and you know, through our planning subsequent to the issuance of this just draft or the final report will really continue to make improvements there.
Okay, thank you. I'll do a final call for any other. Oh, Annette, please go ahead.
Sorry, I'm only speaking so much because nobody else is, but I mentioned the other night at the beginning of the my comments for your first hearing that there aren't very many people participating, and similarly here. I mean, there are very few members of the public who have engaged in this or the Climate Council. I mean, I've followed the Climate Council for many, 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 many hours, and there are a handful of us who actually weighed in and participated. And that concerns me because so many of the average Vermonters, who I will say are not represented well on the Climate Council. It's a very, I will say, well-paid group of people for the most part. And I think that Abby Corse's statement yesterday reflects she is unique in her not being a well-paid person and how much she had to struggle with it. I think that the challenge is how to make these plans relevant to the public. And in a lot of what I see, that the way to get people engaged is propose something really bad in their neighborhood, and then they wake up and they get involved. Now here you are proposing everybody's going to drive electric vehicles. Is that something that people want to do? How do you even know? How do you take the pulse of what the public is willing to do? I don't know that I have any answers for you, but I do just want to recognize that this is a huge problem in the sector in which you're working, which is all our lives really. But people are struggling day to day in many respects just to get through this virus crisis. There's a lot of social anxiety in what we're dealing with. And I guess one concern that I do have is the idea of something that might turn into mandates or something that will catch people off guard. I think the plan is framed well in sort of being aspirational rather than looking at mandates. I know the same thing was true when I was on the Regional Planning Commission for a dozen years. The public never showed up except when there was a contentious project. And so it's sort of the bane of my work is that I deal with a lot of people whose self-interest is affected, and that's why people come to Vermonters for a Clean Environment. And how to make what you're doing and what the Climate Council is doing relevant to Vermonters is something that I think really needs to be a topic of conversation, that it goes beyond the interested groups. 350 Vermont is good at turning out people, but they're not representative of the people who are out working in our society who are potentially affected by these things until they get the word that, oh, you have to do something with your oil furnace, or you can't buy something before that you used to be able to buy. So for what it's worth, those are my final thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. It's really a challenge. I think you're right. I mean, at the department, we are trained and have developed expertise in energy policy issues and not in engaging people. And we need to try and improve. And I'm not sure the best way to do that. But we can think about that more in terms of the final draft, but really just as we go forward, I think that it's just a broader issue in all our state policy. So I definitely hear you, Annette, and happy to have more conversations offline on the best way we could do that. I know, the regulatory world has its challenges for sure in terms of specific siting, but even just more, generally in terms of the energy policy at a high level, if the things aren't acute enough and directly related to people, it's really hard to get participation. And I think more to come, hopefully, on that as the Climate Council's public engagement, which we will be full participants in, and roll out the energy plan at the same way at the same time. Hopefully we can make progress.
And TJ, at this point, I don't see any other hands raised. Give you a
Great.
minute.
Well,
I know that there's a wrap-up slide with additional information on how to submit comments, but I'll let you and Ed sort that out.
yeah, if Claire, you want to pull that up for a second, that would be great. Really, one, we have, looks like there is no wrap-up slide. It really was that slide on opportunities for additional comments.
Yeah, it's a few slides back, Claire.
Yeah, we have 5 public hearings that we're going to have around the state. Due to, we didn't make them hybrid meetings. They're all in-person meetings. And we're, it's tough during a pandemic to hold 5 in-person hearings, but it's also required by statute. I think making them hybrid, the hybrid events that I've been to have not been successful to get participation from both. So we're trying to do online and public hearings separately. but those will be, the locations and the dates are posted. Written comments are really a really good way to get feedback to us, even if it's just in an email to the energy plan website you see on the screen. We really hope to hear from everybody.
TJ, before we end the meeting, I do see that the single phone caller has raised his hand, so please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm John McCormick. I'm calling from Bristol. Excellent comments, and Annette, you really have added a lot to this call in. I want to refer to something you said, I think it was chapter 7, page 30. There was discussion about wind. I found only one word, offshore wind, in the entire document. State of Maine is very aggressively pursuing offshore wind 20 miles off the coast, and anticipates that their floating wind tower could be operational by 2023. Probably a 14 megawatt unit, and the generating system by Siemens is, it's becoming world class. I have to believe that the aggressive approach that the Climate Council has taken towards electrification, much needed, but very little discussion about where will the new supply originate. I don't see it coming from Vermont solar. I really don't. I don't see it coming from Vermont wind either. But offshore is a potential that has to be addressed really in detail. President Biden has launched what he hopes would be a 30 gigawatt offshore wind program on the 3 coasts. Well, there'll be time when some of these things come online. Certainly, Vineyard Wind now has access to a $2.3 billion loan to begin construction, frankly, this early next year. Can you tell me, is Vermont actually talking with Maine about any involvement, participation, even funding? And I'll just leave my comment at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John, for that comment. So I'll start with the modeling, maybe because that's what I'm most familiar with, and the increases in electric demand that we're talking about. When those are projected to be met in the main mitigation scenario by the least cost resource, so those forecasts of what everything's going to cost, offshore and onshore wind around the region were considered the least cost. And so in terms of talking with other states, we do participate in regional discussions with the New England State Committee on Electricity, which has representatives from all 6 states, and participate in ISO New England conversations about new generation coming online and promotion of that. Generally, because our state is still vertically integrated, and by that it means that our regulated utilities still can own and contract for long-term for generation, and then also transmission, own and provide services for transmission and also distribution to the end use customer. All the other states in the region are restructured, and you can only have a piece of those components. But because we're in that, well, other states you'll see have, like Massachusetts has state procurements for clean energy, where they are looking for big amounts of energy, and they require their utilities to purchase or issue RFP, or in some states the state does it itself and issues this request for proposals and for generation to meet the state's needs and or transmission to meet the state's needs. Vermont doesn't issue those solicitations because our utilities have the requirement to plan long-term to meet energy service needs of their customers still, whereas the other states don't. That said, we encourage our utilities to be looking long-term through their integrated resource planning process and their procurement processes for the least cost solutions. When I say we encourage, I mean we do that through statute. There's a statute 30 VSA 218C that requires least cost planning. And then just in their integrated resource plans, which go through a whole lot of review in our office, we have guidance for integrated resource plans that is usually an addendum to the energy plan that is done after the energy plan is released, is how it's been done the last couple of times. And so we really encourage that least cost planning, and that statute requires lots of different considerations that sometimes, least cost planning that's environmentally sound and cost effective, reliable. Some of those things kind of, butt up against each other sometimes, and you have to make trade-offs. But I think we can be clearer probably in the language in the electric chapter and what we mean by wind in terms of offshore or onshore, in state or out of state. And we'll take your comment to look at that and see if there are any improvements. But this is a really long-winded answer to say yes. I think offshore wind is certainly a consideration for providing future loads and services, electricity to Vermonters.
Okay, thank you, TJ. I do see no further hands, and so I guess I can hand it back to you, TJ, if you have any final comment, any final word.
Yeah, just thank you again. And I hope folks, if they're interested and comfortable, can come to public hearings, and if not, written comments will be really useful. And this, I think I said it at the beginning, but this is really a step in the process, the draft, and we will we're listening to comments, and we'll consider them as we move to a final draft. But the process, the energy planning process, doesn't happen just once every 6 years. It's really ongoing, and variables change and things shift, and we need to make sure we're just considering all the right variables and the impacts to all the right constituencies, all the varied constituencies, and have transparent understanding of the trade-offs associated with our decisions. And so hopefully the plan can get there. And again, I very much appreciate your comments and engagement on this.